here.
Say that,
Going to,
Mayor, I'm sorry, say that one more time, starting now.
all council members are present. We are going to have a working session that will extend till 3 p.m. except for a couple of breaks. Michael?
Okay. Welcome to the retreat, a new spot. Nice. Okay. You have a packet in front of you, an agenda as well. We used the standard process to develop the agenda. In that same tab in your workbook are some ground rules. We worked together quite a long time, so I feel no need to go over them, but they do exist. The one we always want to look towards is efficiency in our conversations. I really appreciate that because in a second we'll see why. It's a big agenda, a number of topics. No real way to know exactly how much time it'll take, but we are going to stay within our time parameters, and so I'll need your help with that as always. Yes.
Since we're going out to the public, could you introduce yourself and your role with respect to this?
Sure. My name is Michael Pendleton, and I'm the facilitator for the annual retreat. Okay. And everybody else knows everybody else, right? Okay. A quick look at the agenda. We use the standard process, as I mentioned. There are particular discussion modules that are husky, if you will, with a lot of items in there that you have identified, certainly important to the city and to the future. I don't feel the need to go through them particularly, but we'll push hard towards the end of this day and see why when you take a look at it. Tomorrow's agenda is no less ambitious. My understanding is that staff will be with us today, not tomorrow. Is that correct, Rob?
For the most part.
For the most part,
Yeah.
Okay. So staff is here. Thank you for giving your time to come and support this effort, if you do. With that, any questions or comments on the agenda before we start? Okay, as we have done in the past, it's a time to look backwards, 2018, identify some major accomplishments. I think it's an important thing to do at a retreat. Remind yourself, you spend the year looking at each of these items very specifically. It's rare that you have an opportunity to step back and look at them collectively, and I think that's important because historically, and I think 2019 will be no exception, you've accomplished a number of things in the year. So with that, I just go to you and ask you to nominate things that you remember as accomplishments or consider things that were completed in 2018. No.
We worked on the mobile home park and we can be concluded.
What else? Stacy,
Starting at
Just
the
so that, yeah.
you did start at the Public Works?
in-house public works.
Oh, okay.
Separated from the other.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, what else? Nigel.
Worked through probably the toughest budget we've had in a while.
Okay. Deborah.
A local road safety plan.
What else? Joe.
City of Kenmore's first ever Pride Declaration.
Okay.
Lake Point feasibility study,
Okay.
which gave us actual knowledge. It can and cannot be done.
Milton.
Rhododendron Park improvements with connectivity between the park and the water and the dock.
fumes from this pen, it's probably gonna have your pass out. Right,
The opening of the Seaplane, a nice downtown restaurant.
what's
I
the
was Seaplane,
Okay,
kitchen and grill or pub and kitchen.
Yeah.
Beer and I don't, normally I wouldn't mention a commercial, but it was only because that's what we had planned for that.
Right,
space.
right,
So that's why
I
it's
recall.
significant.
right. Okay, what else?
At least, I think preliminary funding for basketball hoops in the park project right next to town hall.
Is that near the hangar? Or,
No, it's right next to town, by the skate park.
okay, right. Okay, what else?
For significant design through in the walkways and waterways projects.
Project completion too.
Okay, what else? Deborah?
Gotta say the boathouse, shell house. Plan and funding,
Both shell house.
yeah, so funding for it.
Okay, Joe?
Amazing art shows, cutting edge art shows are in the town hall. With Kenmore Arts.
Stacy, no, no.
Public health ordinance.
Oh, wow. Wilson?
Major progress on the Sammamish Bridge planning.
Okay. David?
2 projects completed with walkways and waterways.
Okay. Okay, what else? Joe?
I think it was within this time period, completion of the sidewalk nearer to Kenmore Middle School. If it was, and probably other sidewalk improvements that I can't. Middle school. So to help out, Target Zero.
Okay, what else?
Sand lodge permitting and basically kickoff of construction.
Okay. Up to 18, Joe.
And with the Sanders Lodge, at least, I think it's fulfillment of Daniel's Real Estate in purchasing those 9 acres north of the park and adding it to our St. Edward State Park. And
McDonald property acquisition.
McDonald property. And beginning planning for the St. Edwards, I think it's Environmental Learning Center, which public planning is coming up for nonprofit use of part of that project.
On the same project. St. Edward. So, Deborah?
We got, we staff did an analysis of North Shore School District ball fields to look for underutilized ones. Can I have another one?
Sure.
We have a car charging station.
Milton?
Negotiated with Main Street to finish their last piece of development, with some retail and some housing.
Negotiated Main Street real estate.
For commercial and housing.
It's okay, he's got a leg injury.
I couldn't remember when we actually came to a conclusion what would be built there, but it could have been in the last year, so.
Did somebody already say the plastic bag ordinance?
Nothing I remember.
I don't have it working.
Nichols is flying.
There you go.
Okay, what else? 22, we can get to 25, I'm sure.
Surface water management with some monitoring stations and a couple of streams this year.
So, you say wastewater management?
Surface water.
Surface
Water
water.
management, so you could say SWM monitoring stations in, where was it? What streams in Swamp Creek in 056?
Oh, we got one in 056.
Station or stations?
Plural.
Or, okay.
I've got a biggie,
All right, 24.
unless
Come on, do
council
this.
wants to get.
What
20th
else?
anniversary celebration.
Oh, yeah.
25th?
20th.
20. One more.
I've got one but it's insignificant in the whole scheme of things. Go ahead. We have a lawn at City Hall.
That's cool.
All right, anything else? Joe?
Culvert improvement at Swamp Creek in North Third, turn second.
Swamp Creek and where?
So 202nd?
Okay.
No. No.
192nd.
192nd, yes, yes, sir, 192nd. Swamp Creek.
Okay. 27. Rob?
First full year of the hangar being open.
Okay.
So it was, so I don't know if you want to count that or not, but it was a big deal because we had over 1,000 reservations and it was the first, that year allowed us to see if the vision was really going to materialize or not.
So you had 1,000 reservations?
Yeah.
My image is, it's just going all the time. Oh, no, really, I've been talking to people and stuff, and saying that. That's incredible.
It is.
Yeah.
What an ad for your community. Okay, 28?
Hoping this was this year, the economic plan, what is it?
The update.
Oh, it's just an update.
The update to the economic development strategy.
That's still
Oh,
significant.
that's a lot of
It was
work.
significant.
Yeah.
Updated economic development strategy, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you get to count things that are sort of ongoing, but the movies in the square and the music at St. Edward, those are, in my mind, important community events.
I think our fireworks was bigger than ever. I think we had a crazy turnout, fireworks show and
Good event, okay. All right, 29. So we get to 30, and then we're gonna cut this thing off, I think, unless you, and then we can always add later, as we do, but we get to 30. One more thing. Nancy?
We passed the 1,000 mark of registered businesses.
Well, Okay, there's 30 pretty big things. Many of those things, just as the person that checks in with you every couple times a year, you talked about at your retreat last year and have planned over a period of time. So it's, for me, it's really cool to come back and see all these things that are happening. You see them as events right up and personal, involved in them all the time, but pretty cool. We can always add to this later. If you think of things, you can come up, put stuff up later at the break or what have you, and if the list grows, we'll check in on it later in the retreat. Okay? With that, let's just move right into our financial stability and other fiscal topics. This is an area you at least check in on every year, if not more. And so with that, I turn to Rob, and I would expect Joanne as well. The team we have on this, okay?
So, we routinely update our 6-year forecast. Once we get the final numbers on 2018, then Joanne will update the forecast. But I'm pretty confident that what I told you in the budget is gonna be true, and that is the financial lines are gonna cross in the year 2021. And during the budget discussions, we went into great detail about why that is and all that, so I won't rehash all that. And there's a summary of that in your packet. But what I'm proposing is that rather than reinvent the wheel on this, that we actually ask other neighboring cities who've already gone through this to come and talk to us about how they have created financial sustainability plans, what they've learned from that, what they would do differently, what's gone well for them. And we have a number of cities around us that have gone through this already. Shoreline in particular, back in 2014, created a financial sustainability plan. And an example, Shoreline's example is in your packet. And what's interesting is they are following the plan. So the things they said they would do in that plan, they've been doing. So I'd like to have Shoreline come and talk to you at a city council meeting in the near future. I've also been talking to the city manager of Kirkland. And although I don't think they have a formal financial sustainability plan like Shoreline does, they've had some discussions with the community, and they've taken some measures that are planned and methodical, and they've gotten a lot of community input on that. And I think there's others like Issaquah. There's cities like Redmond and Kirkland that have looked closely at what they call the price of government. And we could have them come and talk to us about that concept. And City of Redmond has done their own version of priority-based budgeting, and we could have them speak about that as well. So what I'm recommending is that we have, I don't know, 2 or 3 cities come to talk to us at work study sessions where we can just ask them questions, find out what they did, and then based on that, we can create a plan for how to create our own financial sustainability plan. So, and I'm thinking it'll probably take all of this year and probably spill into next year a little bit.
Questions, comments? Brett?
On those 3 cities, I do like the idea, and I love reading about the Shoreline, what they've done. That was quite interesting. I would ask that if at least one of them could be a city that is more property tax based in their revenue stream than, like you mentioned, Redmond or Kirkland or Shoreline. They have a little different revenue stream than we do. I think that's important to look at that side of it.
I think Shoreline's pretty residential.
Is it?
Pretty similar to us. But yeah, you're right about Kirkland and Redmond.
I think they have a huge Costco, they have a number of car dealerships, they have a number of retail centers.
Good point, yeah. Okay, yeah, there are some cities like us out there, like Maple Valley, Covington. No, Covington has a Costco. But yeah, we can definitely see what other residential cities are up to.
And if we could find some city about our size, as opposed to a Kirkland Redmond that's quite a bit bigger.
Okay.
I have another question, unless somebody else has something.
Go ahead, Brent.
So in the shoreline thing, one of the things I noticed, they talked about separating core issues, core city functions, and quality of life functions. And it reminded me a lot of our priority-based budgeting and how we assign a value to that. And so it got me thinking, in that whole priority-based budgeting system, is that something we can also take to another level to try to help in this process? Because we've set up this, basically, we've set up an infrastructure to look at where do we want to make our priority investments. And it seemed like a natural area for it to be part of the discussion.
Agreed, and as you know, we've been using priority-based budgeting, but we have not been using it to its fullest. And at times during this last budget process, it was kind of an afterthought, and that was all my fault. The management team, we're actually gonna have our own retreat this coming Tuesday. We're not going outside of Kenmore, but we're gonna have our own retreat this Tuesday, and we're gonna have a discussion about priority-based budgeting as a method, and do we want to stay with it? And if we do, what do we do to use it to its fullest? So once we have that discussion with the management team, I'll be coming and be making a recommendation to you all about it. But yeah, I believe we definitely need a tool, whether it's priority-based budgeting or performance-based budgeting or what other tool out there, to really help us have the discussion and help us in a logical way separate basic services from, other services, and have that kind of conversation.
Okay, Nigel?
I mean, I think this is an important discussion to have, and I appreciate the idea of bringing in other cities. I just really want us to do everything we can to avoid joining the other cities and using levies to pay for basic operations, general fund stuff. As much as we can avoid that route, I'd appreciate that, because if you have to put public safety on a levy, well, it may not pass one year, and then you're kind of stuck. So I'd like to avoid that road as much as possible.
Okay. Other comments, thoughts, reactions to the suggestion or other topics relative to budgeting? Right.
So Nigel's comment plays right into the whole thought of the priority-based budgeting, because if you were to look at that, public safety would be as high as anything on there. And so that's an example of identifying how to pay for that first rather than later, like through a levy or something.
General thought on the priority-based budgeting, I would prefer to stick with that than throw it out and start something over. Because when you call something core and quality measures, basically it's, quartile 1, quartile 4. So whatever you call them, you need a way to sort them out. I think we've already got a methodology to do that. So I'd rather tune it up and make it better than throw it out and go with the trendy thing of the year. So I think it has the capacity to do what we need.
Yeah, I would concur with that and add the wrinkle that if you switch horses, you lose that ability to look at continuity over time and change over time. So I think that there's some value to keeping that history and that consistency.
Okay. Other comments? All right, anything else under fiscal issues, budgeting? Well, okay, let's move along. Walkway and waterways, an update.
So in your packet, you have memos giving the status updates of all the walkways and waterways projects. And the one I'm worried about the most right now is it's not even the walkways and waterways project, it's the Sammamish River Bridge.
That's later.
Yeah, I guess it's later, so maybe. So it's looking like all but one of our walkways and waterways projects are fully funded, give or take a couple $100,000 on each project. Yeah, but the one that still needs the most amount of funding is Juanita Drive. And it's a $16 million project. We have 10 million secured for it right now. 5 of that is walkways and waterways. We asked for TIB money 2 years in a row, scored well, just like we predicted. When we consulted with TIB back during the walkways and waterways campaign, they told us we would score well. And it does, it scores great. But there was one wrinkle that we didn't anticipate, and that is last year, the year before, we got the largest TIB award in the state for the Sammamish River Bridge. And so politically, they have a hard time giving us money for Juanita Drive right now, given that we just got the largest award for the Sammamish River Bridge, and we haven't even spent any of that money yet. And so we're looking at other ways to come up with that 6 million. And I've talked to you all, and for Monday night, we're going to be asking you to change your legislative agenda to ask for 2 million state capital budget. And so that'll bring our request, our TIB request. If we got the 2 million from the state capital budget, that would bring our TIB request in the $4 million range. And maybe make it a little easier to get that TIB request over the finish line.
Okay, Stacy, and then Nigel.
Have we talked about, or have you guys discussed possible phasing options and what that might look like if we need to do that?
Yeah, we have a meeting coming up, is it next week?
Yeah, later this week.
To talk about ways to get going on chunks of it if we can. There are grant requirements. I think there's one grant that says you got to do the whole thing. But yeah, we want to talk about ways to phase it if we can.
You talked about a political issue with TIB. Have you talked with the state delegation at all about maybe them talking to TIB? I don't know how effective that might be, but if it's a political problem, maybe you need to do some politics on it.
Yeah, good.
I don't mean to be glib, I'm just,
No,
there might be a place for the delegation to talk with the executive director or whoever's making the decision over there, just to
No, that's
talk
a
about the
good,
importance of it.
that's a good reminder. I often see TIB as the separate independent board with their own funding, their own dedicated funding source, but
They are, but if they're feeling political pressure from one side, or they feel like they might feel political pressure if they do this, maybe putting some political pressure on them from the other side might help counterbalance a little bit. I don't know. Just an idea.
TIB's, they'd like to spread the money equally amongst all of the agencies. And we did get funding for the 181st sidewalks, and we got the funding for the bridge. And so we actually applied for 2 TIB grants this last cycle, one for 68 and one for 100, and they didn't work either one, and one for 68 was across the street from Murphy's, and we got TIB funding to do that sidewalk from Murphy's, but they wouldn't give us the other ones. So I think it's more just because we got too much money from them. What they told me was, we really don't feel comfortable giving you any more money until you start spending the bridge.
I mean, I would just say that I know Steve isn't there anymore, but Steve had a good relationship with the delegation, and I'm not sure what the new director's been there for a little bit now, but he probably has some relationship with some of the delegation, and he probably feels some political pressure. Just tossing out there.
Bill?
I think it's part of the staging issue. So if we stage it out, that we really spend some money on the Sammamish Bridge, get that underway, and then we could wait a few years before we ask for the TIB money again. Just not that it's out of our reach or we'll never get it, it just might be an issue of time.
my thing is I want to make good on the promise to voters to have Juanita Drive built in the early 2020s. And so I said I was most worried about this, but no, it's the bridge I'm most worried about. But this is the thing I'm second most worried about, but I'm not that worried about, because we always find a way to find the money. We've got some good people that know how to find money. So I think we will bridge the $6 million gap. just might take another year or so to do it. No pressure, John.
I'm looking at Joanne.
Looking right back at you.
Other comments on this one? Questions? Okay. What else on walkway?
Actually, if you have.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure if this is, because I don't understand TIB, the dynamics of it completely, but is it possible that if we use our delegation to put political pressure on it, that it actually could end up working against us in the future? Or is that, I don't know enough about it to know, but what I wouldn't want them to do is if they've already been so generous with us on so many other things, that I wouldn't want to hurt our chances going forward with other needs. That's the only.
It could just be a phone call that said,
Okay.
hey, I hear that Kenworth scored really well. I'd like to hear why, it just,
Right.
somebody asking a question.
Okay.
In a non-confidential way, might, I don't know. Just saw some ideas.
I mean, every once in a while, when the state legislature is dialing for dollars, somebody will bring up the TIB revenue stream. It's a gas tax revenue stream that goes straight to TIB and not for anything else. But every once in a while, some legislators will go, oh, what about TIB? And should we use that to help balance the budget? And so I think it's in TIB's best interests to be on good terms with the state legislature.
Okay. Other comments on this or questions? Joe?
We get a brief summary of Squires Landing mitigation efforts in the purchase. Very brief summary.
Well, it's a very brief version of the yes, we're looking. We are working on the conversion, but not sorry about that. But so we had this a meeting of the RCO funding board is coming up on the 22nd, and that's sort of take a look at our proposal for the conversion and the identified properties we do have an unwilling seller. And we're also contacting a couple of adjacent property owners so that there's better connection for the properties that we currently own on the Swan Street corridor. So we are hoping to be able to complete the conversion process and the acquisition process in 2019.
I forget, was that just the amount of acreage potentially displaced, or is there more acreage?
We're looking at we could go either way on this. So I think the direction we have is just to look at the acreage that's being displaced and look at the replacement properties for that. But if we also have to make the argument with RCO that there's good connection for the acquisition, we may end up having to buy a little bit more, which then gets us closer to the full value of the property. So there's sort of a question mark there. So we're trying to keep it as confined as we can, and we'll know a little bit more after the RCO meeting on the 22nd.
Thank you. Because the property we're looking at is great, but it doesn't connect super well with other like properties that we already own. And so we could get rejected for that reason. If we do, the good news is we have time. We can go back next year and come back with the at least easements through neighboring properties to show a better connection. And I'm just really glad we told the voters 2023, because we have time to work through issues like this.
And I guess the good news piece on that also is that we did receive funding from King County for $850,000 towards the acquisition, which we estimate about 1.2.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Anything else under walkways and waterways, other projects?
Really well-written memos makes for a shorter meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. All right. So are we moving along? Okay. Wow. See lunch pretty soon. Love this. Actually, I shouldn't say that's the best way to jinx ourselves here. Okay, transportation topics. Pavement plan. Who is leading that?
You volunteer, or do you guys want me to take that one?
You added it.
Okay, yeah, we didn't rehearse this beforehand, but, yeah, so, I guess you could, item 31 on your list of accomplishments, you could say pavement rating study. We got that done in the springtime. And it was an eye opener for me because prior study, we said we needed to be investing about $1 million a year, and this one says $2.5 million a year. And inflation is a big reason for that. But regardless, whether it's $1 million or $2 million, we need to be putting more money into pavement preservation than we are. And another interesting thing that came out of that study is they said, rather than take a worst first approach, given that you have a pretty good score of 78, you should go after your good quality roads and work on extending their life rather than going for the worst roads. And so the consultant recommended a pretty aggressive crack seal and slurry seal strategy. And so that's what we're going to be continuing this year in 2019's crack sealing and slurry sealing. We have reached out to some other cities, including Kirkland, who's done really aggressive slurry sealing in recent years. And they have a whole lot of lessons learned they're going to share with us. We're going to meet with them. Yeah, so I guess people can get pretty upset about slurry seals. I didn't know that, but in Kirkland they do. So, you know, there's chip seals, which we all know can pack a city council meeting. But I guess slurry seals can too. But what they've realized is that what's the controversy? So they want overlays. And so when their neighborhood gets slurry sealed, they think that they're the poor stepchild that's getting the slurry seal, and that they're the poor neighborhood. It's not.
That sounds like a much more Kirkland problem than Finland.
Yeah. And then there's also just, you don't get to access your house for 12 hours.
Longer time.
A little bit longer time. So there's that. But Kirkland said that they very successfully have done a lot of aggressive education in advance. They've got some great flyers that we can just copy, and they said that they overcame all that with just aggressive, advanced public outreach. So we'll be, and they'll be talking. They talk about why slurry seals are important, and they use the house siding analogy, which you've heard me use before. It's better to keep the siding on the house painted rather than not paint it and then replace the siding. So they use that analogy with the residents, and that seemed to resonate with the residents. So yeah, we're just going to need a lot of outreach in advance. And slurry seals aren't rough like chip seals, but they still have a little bit rougher surface. And so they're not as smooth and pristine as a freshly paved road.
David?
Yeah. Whatever happened to 170th? We sort of got half of it paved, a third of it paved, with the understanding to come back next year. That was 2 years ago. In the meantime, the new portion that was just paved has had a number of cuts through it from one side of the street to the other that have sort of caused that new portion to be deteriorated. They haven't been patched, brought back up to where they should be. And we still have this 2/3 that's completely undone. And there's nowhere that I see here in the transfer station where there's plans for that to be done. So when will we get back to finish 170th, Simon's Road?
Simon, John, do you want to talk about the asphalt grant, the overlay grant that we have?
Yeah, so we've received about $350,000 in federal funds from PSRC to overlay 162nd to 155th.
Yeah.
And we had asked the county to do that for us as part of their pavement management, and they just told us in December that they aren't going to do it.
Okay.
And so we're now going to take on that in-house and get plans put together for that. And then we're also, depending on the cost, to extend that all the way to the city limits and complete the overlay. for
On
Simons.
155th? Or on
On
170th?
Simons, all the way
On
to the
Simons,
city limits.
because we had the funding for that, I thought, when
only-
we started the project.
We had the funding for the next section, so it was divided up into 3
And
sections.
so we had funding for the first that was done and for the second.
Yes, we got funding for that, and I mean, we had planned to do it this last year, and then,
It was supposed to get done in 2018, but the county couldn't get everything done, so they said they would do it 2019. And then they just told us that they're just not going to do it. They're canceling their federal
they're
overlay program.
correct.
Okay, so the funding is still in place for the second portion.
Yes.
Yes,
And we only have funding for half of the cost for 162nd to 155th. So we're having to use our local dollars to cover the balance. And then we applied for funding for the remainder of Simons, but we didn't get any awards, so it's all happening from our local dollars. And our estimate right now is about 1.6 million to do that.
Yeah, so we could use all of our pavement preservation money and that we have budgeted for the biennium and get you all the way to the city limits on Simons. We could do that. But doing that would wipe out all of our crack seal and slurry seal money. And our consultant said, no, you need to focus on your good roads and keep those. So I want to try to get as much of Simons paved as possible and still do an aggressive crack and slurry seal. So we're gonna see how the 2018 budget lands and see if there's some extra money there, maybe Joanne. But I want to stretch those dollars as much as I can. So I want to overlay Simons as far as we can get it, but still do asphalt and slurry seal this year.
And that's fine. I mean, I certainly can agree with that. I'm just concerned that we're not aggressive enough with the contractors that have dug up the road and bringing it back to where it needs to be.
Somebody want to speak to that?
Are you referring to developers?
Yes,
So our standards require them to do a half-street overlay whenever they do any kind of frontage improvements. And so I'm not sure which areas that might be of concern.
well, down from across from Rhododendron Park.
so I just would add that I think there's several projects that are still in the,
Okay,
still ongoing, and so, that would be the last thing that they would be doing, would be buttoning
That's
up
fine.
that, so
but there is a development
a little
just
further
before
out.
84
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
completed, sold, park, kids are playing in it, and I don't think they brought that road back to where it should be.
Right
But
by the crosswalk there you're talking about.
Further down
by
the
the,
hill.
yeah, there was some big road work
It
going
also
across.
depends on when they put in their permits as to which standard they had to follow. And I'm not familiar with when those were done.
We can look into that specific one, but let's say they cut a trench all the way across the
Right.
road, which they have by Rhododendron Park.
Right.
They're not allowed to just patch that trench and walk away. They have to do a full overlay of how many.
Full
feet.
width. If they're trenching across the road,
Yeah, then how wide is the new overlay?
should be the whole width of the road
The
and
whole
then
width
10
and
feet on either
20
side of
20
the
feet
end
on
of
the
the
trench.
trench. I think
Yeah, so about 20 feet wide by the full width of the road. Yeah. And the other thing is, when we do an overlay of a road, we don't know when properties are gonna redevelop.
Right.
And if we're always worried about when properties were developed, we would never do an overlay. Those properties, when we did that overlay of Simons, we didn't know when and if those properties were gonna come and develop.
What we do try to avoid though is any utility projects, so we try to get that information out to the utilities so that, North Shore Utility District can say, oh, well, we're gonna be replacing the water main, and that actually happened this last year. There was gonna be an overlay on one road, but they were gonna be doing a bunch of work, and so we decided to pull that off the schedule. So we are trying to coordinate with utilities to avoid doing work where they're just gonna come and tear it up, because
Yeah.
people
I
don't want to
guess-
see that.
I would like to know that our regulations are such that when they come up and do cuts in the road that we just got through finished paving, that their repairs are going to last at least as long as that road is, and not the joints and that not deteriorate quickly.
We will go back to them also if there's failures.
Stacy, Nigel, and Brent.
So we had the old report that said we needed $1 million-ish a year, and the new one that says like 2.5. How are we planning to figure out what the sweet spot is that we really should be doing and work to figure out how to fund to that level?
I'm using the latest report. That's the best information we have. I think the number should be 2.5.
How do we get there?
Yeah, that's part of the discussion we're gonna have over the next year or so.
Okay, so what is the plan to have that discussion also?
We're gonna,
You have to research your stuff and then come back to this, or
well,
how's this
part of
whole
the financial
conversation go?
sustainability discussion that we're gonna have.
Nigel and Brent.
So, excuse me, previous years we're doing about $500,000 a year, is that correct?
Closer to $1 million.
Well, but that's $500,000 was city money, and then we had other funds and money.
Yeah.
With this last budget, we cut about $400,000 worth of programs, brought things in-house. And then we also did the 3%. Where did we end up? And Councilmember Curtis, his amendment kind of put all of those savings into pavement preservation. Where did we end up on the final budget for city funds for pavement preservation?
I can answer that.
Yeah, not
So,
1.7 with the federal money.
yeah, if you include the federal money, we're about 1.7 for the biennium.
So 900 REIT, 400 from budget savings, 300 and something from federal.
So it's better than a poke in the eye. We're not ignoring it.
No, it's definitely improvement over last year.
Yeah, and I know of cities that just aren't doing pavement preservation at all, just because they just can't afford it.
And there might be some unspent money from
Some
18.
unspent, because we had them pulling that one road that North Shore Utility District was working on, so there should be some rollover funds from this money.
Couple hundred, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't closed the books yet.
Pay now or pay a lot later. That's what this is about. Yeah. Brent.
Well, actually, Casey's question was the first part of what I had to ask. And the second one is on the slurry. I think part of our messaging, if we really emphasize that we do have good pavement rating, and the reason we're doing that is to preserve this great pavement. And it really is as Michael just said, pay me now or pay me later. And I think that needs to be, I think it needs to be emphasized that we've done a good job, or we wouldn't have a good rating. But we want to keep a good pavement rating.
Yeah, in fact, I was having a conversation with our public works director of one of our next door cities, and they said, why are you doing so much slurry seals? And I said, oh, because we have a pavement rating of 78. And they go, oh, okay, now I get it. Yeah, I can see why you're doing slurry seals with a pavement rating of that high. So there we go.
Yeah. Okay, other conversations on the pavement plan. Brent.
I actually do have another comment, and it has to do with the construction. And I know this came up once before, but I think it's really, really important, whether it's the utilities or developers that are tearing up the pavement. I think from a typical citizen perspective, they don't see anything else except, why did you just tear up that road after it was paved? And I think it's really, really important that we make it as perfect as possible afterwards, just because that's all they see. And I remember it happened in my neighborhood long before I was on the council, but our cul-de-sac was paved. And then they came in and they put in the sewer or the water lines and sewer lines, because my neighborhood was septic and it was a different house than where I live now. But it was in Kenmore. And I just remember, and it was within like 6 months after they had paved everything. And it, it's an easy thing to attack government on, because it's like, does anybody even know what they're doing? And so I think it's really important that I understand your point. We don't know, we can't plan out everything, but it's important, I think, to make sure it's really done right afterwards, that it's left in top-notch shape.
And I think we can even educate people as to why there is a trench on a road that was just paved 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And explain to them what's going on. A lot of people will get it.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on the pavement plan? Okay. Sammamish River Bridge. That was in the news recently. Driving.
For which issue?
It was the one where they closed it.
Yeah.
That was the one that got my attention because I'm right. Let's see if we can hear it.
Was
So
this the
Sammamish
one-
River Bridge, it's on
Okay.
here, and I think, Brett,
Yeah.
you did.
So when we had that closure, of course, that was the first time I had, I've lived on the north side and the south side. And I don't ever recall in 30 years that bridge being completely closed down. And it made me realize that whether it's the construction of the new bridge, whether it's a natural disaster or earthquake or something, it's not unreasonable to think that the bridge may have to have a closure again. And when you start to think about your options, your only options are Wayne Golf Course and the bridge out there, or going all the way around to 102nd in downtown Bothell or 405. And if our bridge went out in a natural disaster, it's also not unreasonable to think that the bridge at Wayne could go out as well, because that's also, I believe, a rather elderly older bridge. And so I think we need a contingency plan to move people across the river. And how that happens, I actually don't know, but I know we have a boat ramp on one side. And I think we need some plan it could be a flat barge. But if you think about it, there is no plan whatsoever just to get somebody 50 feet, 100 feet across the river. And not everybody has to bring a car. Some people might just need to catch a bus to work. But if they have to drive all the way around to Bothell, it's just going to aggravate all the other mess that exists. And I was talking to Al at NUD a couple of weeks ago. It was right after this bridge thing, the closure had happened, and I'd walked to NUD where Brenda works, and we walked across the bridge so she wouldn't drive or didn't have to drive around. And I was talking to Al, he goes, we have this little pontoon boat that they have. They're pretty, they use it, but they've only had it a few years. And I thought even something like that, just to have an agreement with NUD or some other agency that maybe there's 2 or 3 options that we could go to just to ferry people across. So I don't know what the next step is, but I do think we do need to at least have a plan to get people across the slope.
The dragon boaters offer.
There you go.
To get people across
Okay.
10 at a time.
Comments, reactions?
So with our emergency plan that we have in place, what is our plan for if an earthquake knocked that bridge out for 6 months? It's something we've thought about, right? We're required to have a emergency plan that considers those kinds of things. What's our plan?
And I remember back in Steve Anderson days, it was Wayne using Simon's 100 for Wayne back on the 522.
Another bridge.
Is that still the plan? Or does anybody know? Or just something we have to research to see what our plan actually says?
I think it's more of it's totally dependent on what the event is. I mean, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything in the books that say this is what we're gonna do.
Not specifically for the bridge itself. We do have stuff in place that if the bridge is out, how we're going to operate on each side of the river, but not how we're going to replace or get across the river. There's other areas on the other side of the bridge that we can set up temporarily for, but not specifically to get across the river.
Which is exactly what happened. I mean, fire and ambulance service got set up on the other side of the bridge during this, from my understanding. So, Stacy?
Yeah, right after this happened, I talked to you and you guys were gonna do some kind of an after-action review. Wondering if that's something we could see, just because I have strong opinions sitting there at Inglemore trying to get my kid out. It was 30 minutes before any of the buses could get out because it was just so backed up, one traffic cop like school stop and stop times to get people out of there. Little things like that other people may have noticed in their, just usage of how they work through things. Anyway, I'd be interested in seeing that if you guys did that, but okay.
I really found no issues in that traffic over there, leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning.
After I got out of Bangor, it took me an hour to get back home. But, I mean, the buses full of kids were, could never turn left.
Is the river
So good.
swift underneath it?
No.
Very slow moving.
Okay.
You can easily paddle upstream.
Except in March and April.
There you go.
It's quite different.
And you're talking 50 feet, is that seriously?
So, well, I mean, maybe it's 75, 100 feet, but what I know is, so I realize the emergency side is a whole nother issue that I don't have to worry about because I'm assuming NUD, or not NUD, but North Shore Fire District, they set up a place, from my understanding, up on Pin Hill. They're working on that. I'm just looking at how to move people so you don't have that many more cars on the road that in an already congested environment, like Stacy's talking about. And it just seems like it could be, we just need to have a contingency plan, I believe. And so,
Good.
I mean, they always say you're as strong as your weakest link. Well, that bridge is the only link to the north and south.
Joe, Deborah, then David.
In short, I agree with Brent. It seems the only thing that would take out the bridge entirely might be the one of a 9 or 8 or 9 on the Richter scale, which we haven't had in modern times. But even, some unforeseen structural failure perhaps, or construction related issue. I think it's a great idea that we start exploring.
Deborah, David, Bill.
And mine is a question. I just remember when I was walking around neighborhoods, at the very easternmost edge of the city, off of Buffalo Way, there's a little tiny road that goes down to the slough and a little tiny bridge that goes across. And I don't think that's the one you're talking about.
No.
Wayne. I don't know
No.
what that bridge is.
Yeah.
And it's really small, but it does take, I think, people and cars
Yeah.
across.
Yeah, it's to the
It is
homes on the other
private.
side. It's a private bridge, goes to the
Oh,
homes.
it's private?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, right.
Could condemn it.
But again, in an emergency, I wonder if there could be some contingency plans for at least using that for pets, but,
And that's a great example.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of thing,
yeah, some agreements,
yes.
David, and then Mel.
So I wonder if it would be advantageous, because that's right, it'd be a serious issue if that bridge should go out.
Right, although I suppose, somebody said if our big bridge goes out, it's probably unlikely that that little tiny bridge would
Would
survive
survive
either,
too.
but
But
still,
could-
worth exploring.
Army Corps puts up bridges all the time and moves them around. Army has surplus. Is there a possibility of picking up one of those bridges? The surplus ones that we could sort of unfold
Like a
and put
pontoon
across
type
the
bridge.
stream, because it's so narrow. I mean, we're not talking a huge
Right.
span here.
Right.
And surplus stuff is not unreasonable. It certainly would be something that could save the day potentially. Because certainly on the south side, you've got roads going right down to where the bridge could be laid. Problem is on the other side, but still, it certainly could be worked out.
Bill?
Mine is kind of related. It seems like several years ago on I-5, one of the bridges went out and they
Yeah,
brought some
right.
kind of a big.
Yeah.
Right up here.
Yeah, some big bridge in place and they were able to get it going fairly quickly.
Yeah, they rebuilt it.
Extraordinary, because it was a disaster. I mean, they had to. That's the beauty of a disaster, is at least you can get things done quickly.
Yeah, you get the funds, you get through the permit.
It's the
Well,
only
they were the
beauty.
only ones going on that disaster.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Everybody has that
Widespread.
disaster.
Yeah, the permitting process there would have killed them if they had.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay. Any other, so I'm hearing some interest in exploring what's the plan. So is that maybe work item for staff to do some considerations on this?
Yeah, I think that'll be fairly easy to look at some good ideas.
Yeah, if you're the average citizen, you probably have assumed the city has a plan. Just because there's only one bridge, you assume that, oh, I'm sure they've got a plan, but we don't have a
Okay. So that, we're gonna start a bit of a process to take a look at that.
Yeah, I think we should even look at things like an agreement with Lakeside School and Craig Hopkins, so that we can have a landing spot.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Okay.
And then, an agreement with KWAC that we get to use their boats.
Absolutely.
And then the agreement that we can use their boats in a disaster.
I remember when the ferry went on strike and an instant little fleet developed between Kingston and Edmond, people who had boats, like 2 weeks. It just happened. People were getting,
That is actually,
Uh-huh.
that's actually another idea, because we have a lot of waterfront homes and boats. So, I mean, that's, Yeah.
and these were to satisfy community, actually, going back and forth. That went on. Anyway, anything else on the bridge? Is it open now? I just heard it last, right? So.
Just one observation on that. Day one was hell. Day two, traffic was fine. Now, I know school wasn't in session, and I know a lot of people purposely stayed home. But people planned, once they knew that the bridge was closed, they figured out a different way. And they're talking about Viadume tonight, starting
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah.
I think people are gonna find a way, and I don't think it's gonna be as crazy and as jammed as people are saying it's gonna be. I could be wrong.
It'll be good for the first few days.
Yeah.
It's really
Right.
good. That's what I'm expecting with my community.
Well, and actually, the timing actually might work against them. Because on the weekend, you're gonna see less flow than you would during commute. So the message could be, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was gonna be on Monday. Everyone's going, okay, well. Okay, anything else on the bridge? All right. We have about 10 minutes before we'll go to break, so we'll launch into the local road safety plan update. I think, Deborah, you were interested in having that done, I think, or something, so. What say ye on that one? Staff?
So the local road safety plan was done, we submitted for some grant funding with it and did receive, I believe, $360,000 to put in a variety of speed feedback signs to replace some, to add some lighting. Call how many spots to redo the trail crossing at 65th and 61st. And we've had some issues and some concerns about that, so we've got some money to take care of that. So that's going to be the first phase of implementing the local road safety plan projects. And then we're also going to start some community engagement process to look at potential restriping of 73rd and 80th.
right, exactly.
Yeah, we want to get the feedback before we commit.
And I had twofold reasons for bringing this up. One was to hear that. And to ask if there's a way to message that. I mean, this is a huge priority for the city and the citizens to have safe routes for pedestrians, bikes, and cars. Somehow just saying, here's how we are systematically chipping away at this issue. So that's my hope, is that we can, really elevate this work. And then the other is I love everything that's going on, and I'm excited about the restriping. It's a, modest piece. And I guess what I'm wondering is, we have this wonderful plan now. How do we continue, kind of keep pushing on that? Are we starting to look for grants for like 2020? How are we kind of keeping the momentum on that? Because I know our big grants were kind of done now, I think, right? The ones that we had to do that kind of big push.
The majority of the projects in the local road safety plan are fairly small.
Yeah.
Some of them are larger and some are part of another evaluation. For example, we have SR 522 crossing. Some of the elements in the local road safety plan are going to be taken up with that study. So that's kind of how we're gonna do that. With the grant funds that we went for last year, that comes out about every 2 years. It's their systematic highway safety improvement program, systematic grant funding. And so we won't be applying this year for anything in the local safety funds. It won't be anything available, but they might have a call next year. So we'll put a call out, request for funding, and if we get that, great. What I've also done is I've budgeted in $50,000 a year to implement little projects within the safety plan. If we want to increase that, then again, we can have a conversation. next budget.
And a conversation around the smaller pieces. There was a comment, and I can't put my fingers on it right now, but there was something on the order of, I mean, it said many or even maybe hundreds. I mean, there was a lot of cars that came in, and a lot of those cars relate to road safety issues, whether they're bike ped or cars. And I don't know whether, again, in terms of the messaging, whether, you know, you can kind of, because you're responding to all of those, you know, I mean, you guys, I mean, staff as a whole, the city is responding to these things and changing things. And I would love to elevate that and to kind of have it be a nice framework that, you know, we just keep doing this stuff and we're highly focused on that, because we are. And I think we're doing the work. So, yeah, I would love to see what some of those were. There was just a comment, we had a lot of cars and we did. It's like, cool.
So, yeah.
Cincinnati request, yeah.
And there are a lot of cars, I don't know, you want to actually go through every single one.
Oh, not today, but no, but I mean.
Well, I was
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, to have, you know, that obvious to people.
Yeah, but a good chunk of what Tobin does, a traffic engineer, is it's mostly traffic calming type requests, mostly speeding concerns, and so he hits those one at a time as he gets them. That's the bulk of them. Some of them are parking, some are lighting, so that's generally what they are.
I just have one little thing to add about operations. I know we don't think about this when we think about grants and putting new infrastructure in a lot of the times, but there is no free money. And I just, you know, want to say that all these things we put on these little lights, projects, whatever, it seems small at this time, but incrementally, we're paying maintenance and operations for those things. So I just want to keep in mind that as operation, costs go up, you'll see those go up in the operations budget, and just being aware of, it's not just inflation, but we're adding all these little things, all of the, neighborhood transportation plans that were implemented, all the signs, new lights and all that, it costs, ongoing. That's right. It's always have to.
So do you automatically fold into your budget then O&M when you add?
It's not automatic necessarily, no. But it's always a question to ask.
Another thing, if I might, is you would think that if we do a bunch of ped bike safety improvements, that our citizens will be satisfied and the complaints will go down. No, what actually happens is we raise expectations, and the level of service and the level of expectation goes up citywide. So the more sidewalks we put in, the more people are going to go, well, I want a sidewalk too. Or the more speed bumps we put in, people are going, well, how come I don't get a speed bump? We're getting requests, like in David's neighborhood, there's these rural, windy roads. And we're getting newcomers moving in to on those streets and wanting us to do something about ped bike safety on these rural, winding roads. Because they're seeing other stuff happening in the rest of the city. And I don't know what to do with these rural, winding roads other than more speed bumps, maybe. Those aren't always the best answer. So I just think the more we're doing, the more people are wanting us to do more.
Yes.
So.
Kind of on the operation and maintenance side of bike lanes. We have a really good street sweeping schedule. I've been in the car actually this week. Simon's being so booed up that bikes are going, and then I had one just swerve out right in front of me as I was driving, so I get around a big pile of goo. And I know that that's hard, but if we're doing the bike lanes, we need to make sure that the bike lanes are actually usable.
So the goal is to sweep them every week.
Oh, that's been a long time for
With
sidewalks.
this transition
Oh, is that where
and,
that got lost?
you know, losing people, Lake Forest Park lost people actually before the end of the year, so they're short-staffed. And so just that whole transition and then the windstorm kind of hit at the perfect time. And so, yesterday was the first day that we got out with our new folks and doing some street sweeping,
Okay.
so.
But we do have a good plan to keep bike
The
lanes.
plan is to
on the
do it
arterials, to keep them pretty clean.
once a week. Yeah, that's the plan.
Joe, the rest of you ready?
No.
Okay. David?
Yeah, speaking of street sweeping, do we still have possession of it?
We do, it
It's
is ours,
I know,
Yes.
okay, good.
yes.
But there's about,
But
Lake Forest Park wants to borrow it.
for a fee,
For fee.
Yes.
But I would also add, we're actually, for the first time, moving to a contract service as well. So next week, I'm actually hopefully finalizing a contract where we're actually gonna have all that routine sweeping that just year round, they're out every quarter, in the fall, they're out certain dates. That's gonna be a contracted service now to supplement what we can do with our own sweeper as well.
That makes a lot of fun.
Yes.
Is that, so if we sweep more regularly, does it actually help us a lot on the cleaning out the basins and everything?
Yes.
So there's actually a cost benefit
Mhm.
to sweeping, not just a safety benefit.
There's a big surface water management component of that. The more we sweep, the cost to get that material off the surface of the road is a fraction of what it costs once it's in the system for us to try and back that out.
That's, makes a lot of sense.
Anything else on this? Okay, we'll come back to bus rapid transit, but I'd like to have you take a break. We've sitting here quite a while, so. let's do that.